probably on Facebook now. So, that's the thing. All right, we are live with Elizabeth Berg on A Mighty Blaze. Thank you so much for joining me, Jenna Blum, for our Frontliner Friday with one of the most beloved authors in the universe, not just to me personally, but when I put on my own Facebook page and social media that Elizabeth Berg was joining us today, people were like, oh, I love her so much. And this is true. It's like, you can go see, it's true. I love her so much. She's my favorite. She's my inspiration for writing. I also love Elizabeth like a fangirl. So I've had to actually prepare questions so I don't just sit here and like make heart eyes at you for an hour and ask you to tell stories. But I'm going to embarrass you by reading your official bio from Penguin Random House. And then I'm going to embarrass you by telling the story about the grilled cheese sandwich that you don't remember, but I remember. And then we're going to do some chatting about stuff. So Elizabeth Berg, I'm going to put my glasses on because I need them because I'm old now. Elizabeth Berg is the author of many best-selling novels, New York Times best-selling novels, I should say. I counted them last night. You have over 30 novels. Am I right? That is just like,
yeah, 30 books. It's 20-something novels.
20-something. I was trying to sieve out the non-novels from the novels. I know you have like writing, how-to writing and memoir and novels, but lots of luscious novels. Book club selections, Oprah's book club selection, the latest being the Arthur Trulove series and the Confessions Club, and the Year of Pleasures, Talk Before Sleep, which is one of my personal favorites. So it was such a guide to me during some tough times in my life. The Year of Pleasures, Durable Goods, Joy School, Pull of the Moon. Your work has been published in 30 countries. 3 of your novels have been turned into TV movies. And some of your more popular Facebook posts have been collected in Make Someone Happy and Still Happy, which I would love to talk about because it's good to talk about happiness. And you live outside Chicago, where I think you're joining us from today. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. All right. So we're both Midwestern girls today. Good Midwestern girls. Although, as our producer, the fabulous and glittering Jenna Payon pointed out, you look like you're actually in a Nancy Meyers movie, like on, Montauk somewhere. So well done. I need to like fangirl personally on Elizabeth because her kindness is so legendary to other authors. And I'm going to tell my story about this, that when I was starting out with my first book, and it had this sort of miraculous success and became a New York Times bestseller, which was astonishing to everybody, mostly me. I remembered reading a story, and correct me if I'm making this up because I write fiction, so that's what I do. But I remembered reading a story that you and your best friend were both writers, and when you hit the bestseller list for the first time, you were so excited that you put the list on a t-shirt, which I love because I think everything should be on a t-shirt. Like every time I say something even pseudo clever to my own ears, I'm like, oh gosh, I should put that on a t-shirt. So you put the bestseller list on a t-shirt, and then your friend got really mad at you and stopped talking to you for a long time.
It was for my dad. It was
Oh,
for my dad. Yeah. And then as long as I was getting one made for him, I got one made for me to sleep in. So there you go.
oh my gosh, that's such a good, you're already a much nicer person than I am, because I'd be like, look, I have a t-shirt and it me on my t-shirt walking up and down this billboard. Like I actually have a billboard upstairs in my office. Wallpaper, like makeup, tattoos on my forehead, everything. So she does this for her dad. And I remembered reading this story and thinking, oh, I bet there are, some pitfalls here in having this sudden really good thing land on you. It's like, the house from the Wizard of Oz, like landing on you. And so I cold emailed Elizabeth, like care of her website, and said, hi, I'm a baby author. This amazing thing just fell on me. Can you maybe give me some guidelines about how my life is going to change in both good ways and unanticipated ways? And Elizabeth not only wrote back to me right away, but when you came to Boston for your next book speaks, you said, well, let's go out to lunch. And I was like, no, I'm so knock-kneed with like great fear and awe. And we went to a diner. This is the grilled cheese sandwich part, and had a grilled cheese sandwich and fries, which is like best meal ever, and a malted. And you talked to me about the ways in which, I could expect my life to change and what it was like to be an author, like how to be an author, basically. And then we went and shopped for books at this giant book emporium. And it's like one of the top 10 experiences of my life. And so I always think of this as like quintessentially Elizabeth Berg. So many of us who love her books know that for me, they're like my comfort food. Like they're the books that I go to when I am feeling blue or when I'm feeling sad or disconnected. I know that I can open any page of any Elizabeth book. And even though the people are facing real hard things in the novels, there's always a gem of something hopeful or beautiful on each page. And so for me, like the real life experience of knowing you is like that. So I'm so happy to see you. And I also think that that experience is so beautifully reflected in your books and your behavior. So thank you for being here with us. Longest preamble ever. I know people are much more excited to hear you talk than me. So they're like, shut up, Jenna. Let's talk to Elizabeth.
I doubt it. You're so charming. In fact, just keep talking. I'll just keep listening. But I wanted to just say something at the beginning of all this. I'm just going to say the obvious. We're living in terrible, terrible, depressing times. And one of the ways that I deal with it, besides eating, is to really compartmentalize in a way I never have before. And what that lets me do is enjoy the thing, whether it's cutting open a red pepper and looking at the seeds and the color contrast and tasting things, or looking at the sky, or watching these, Jenna. I told Jenna P too that I am so deeply grateful for what you guys do. It's not easy to take, first of all, the whole thing is not easy. I can't even imagine. But when you're a writer and you never know when you're going to be in it, really in it, and then you have to be out of it for some arbitrary reason, it's really hard. It's a sacrifice. And you are doing so many wonderful things for so many people. So when I watch your interviews, I give into them wholly, and I am transported away, and I don't hurt, and I'm not confused or sad. I'm inspired. I'm galvanized. I want to go get the book, and I learn things every time. And I hope you know how very much appreciated you are. And it's an honor to be on your show.
Okay, we're 5 minutes in. I'm already like, oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I do see like you posting and sharing our interviews, the Blaze interviews on Facebook. And I'm so glad, not just as my marketing whore self, which admittedly is very strong in me, but because I feel the same way when I watch the interviews with the writers on the Blaze. It's my favorite thing that we do because it reconnects me with my writer self in a very pure way. To hear writers every Tuesday, every Thursday, every Friday, talking about craft, how they make their books, how they separate the circumstances we're living in now from their lives. And just each of the interviews contains these gems, right? So I feel like it's almost like the master class in a very informal way every week. And I love that. So thank you for sharing that wealth. And I know we had talked a little bit before the call about setting intentions, and you had wanted to set an intention for our talk, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
So following what I just said, in terms of setting an intention, I would just hope that we can all set aside everything else just for this time that we all have together, and just have a good time. I almost mixed martinis, but it's only me. It would be very sloppy if I did that. But I hope if anyone's watching that you'll just get comfortable and feel free to ask questions and just be here now, as they say. And then I have a little something about setting intentions to say at the end. So we'll get to that at the end.
I'm so excited. Thank you. And I'm glad you didn't tell me about the martinis beforehand, because I would have made myself a big gin and tonic, which is my thing right now. I'm just going to show you like what I drink when I'm here in Minnesota. You will find us, somebody who used to live in Minneapolis, you will appreciate why I had to buy this. It's very literary. It's blue.
Oh,
for my gin and tonics. I saw this and I was like, home called onion, babe the blue ox. So, this is my nod to like my writing home that I'm in.
great.
Yes. And what do you like to drink these days? Let's start the interview with that, because I feel like that's a very happy making thing, right?
Well, first of all, I'm a terrible drinker, terrible. I get 3 sips into a martini and I'm lying on the table. So talk about a cheap date, cheap drunk. I never liked drinking. All in college, when I was in my 20s, I didn't like it. I just didn't like it. And then I had a martini and I said, oh, I get it. So for a long time, I liked Bombay Sapphire gin martinis. That was my drink, with blue cheese olives, 3 of them, and or 4 if I could get away with it. And now it's vodka, because of my friend Phyllis of T-shirt fame, who, by the way, is a wonderful writer. Can I just say, she has not published a book yet, but her essays are online. If you go to, I think it's Phyllis Florin, FLORIN.com. She has a number of essays, and there's one, my very favorite, is called Prairie Music. And if you go to the site, phyllisflorin.com, I think she called the collection Domestic Epiphanies. And Prairie Music is about her old bachelor uncle who lives on the prairie by himself and listens to jazz records, and it's the most beautiful essay I think I've ever read. So she's a great writer, and I think part of it, I just want to defend her for getting mad at me about the T-shirt, because it's hard sometimes when your friends are doing well, and then they're doing well, and then they're doing well, and then this happens, and then that happens, and after a while, unless you're an exceedingly gracious person, you kind of feel like, don't even tell me anymore. So
I have no idea what that's like. I have no illustrious friends who are doing amazing things. I mean, there is no, I'm totally kidding. Like, every writer knows what that's like. Every writer, no matter what stage. I had this great keynote for the Grub Street Muse and Marketplace Writers Conference. Why is that hard to say when I haven't been hitting the gin yet? Who knows?
It's a suggestion.
It's just yeah, I'm such a cheap drunk. I just wave the bottle around and I'm like, you don't know me. Anyway, so so we were talking about writer envy. One of the audience questions was about writer envy and how do you deal with writer envy? And I was just saying, it's just a fact of life. And it's because, people can be winning accolades and star reviews and prizes, and their books get made into movies and series. And that's great. But at some point we all have to go back to the chair and the empty screen, or the empty notebook and the pen. And so it's like this Ferris wheel, and you're always going to be down and then back up and then down and then back up. So I love that you have this really long lasting writer friendship and have watched that cycle.
She did a lot of work to get through it, I have to say. And it was a very painful time. I was at the time flying out to San Francisco once a month, where she lived, from Boston. And to go there and not see her was really, really awful. Mm-hmm. But she did, and she wrote about it in, I did a book on writing called Escaping into the Open, and she wrote about getting through that in that book. She contributed that experience, which was really great of her. Yep. I would say, I get excited for writers who do well. I'm glad for them if I like them. There are some writers, I have to say it, there are some writers I don't like so much. Not many, but there are a few. And when they do super well, then I get, I'm not gonna, let's see, what can we say on this show? But anyway, then I get, it's not even jealous. It's just that I start thinking, I know writers who are so much better than you and are not getting the attention that you are, and it pisses me off. So yeah, but I think it can be said about all of us writers too, that we love reading so much that we're really glad when somebody does a beautiful work of art, and to immerse yourself in and to take flight with. It's such a service.
It is, and especially now, I've heard so many people, readers and writers who are readers, say it's so hard to read right now. My attention is so fragmented, and I feel always grateful as a writer when I can get sucked into a book without thinking about how it was put together. Right? This is like a sort of a casualty of writing professionally, I think, for me at least, is that you are always looking for how the sausage is being made and how did he or she do this or that. So when I have a story that enraptures me and lifts me out of my daily life and pulls me into it completely, I'm so grateful. And I have to say, and I'm going to sound like a sycophant, but like everything I read of yours is like that. And that's partly why I treasure your books so much, is I know that they're going to take me out. Remember the Calgon commercial? Like, Calgon, take me away. It's like your books are like the Calgon that I think, oh good, there's a new Elizabeth Berg Calgon out that's going to take me away from the quotidian and bring me into this world where things are real, but they also feel good. So that's so great. And
Well,
your new,
I'm
well,
glad that happens.
a thing. It's true. And the new books, which I was reading on a screen, and I never read on a screen, so such is my love for you that I am
I
reading
know it's
on a
awful.
screen. But you have it behind you. I'll be seeing you. It sucked me right in, even though I was reading on a screen, and I forgot to be cranky that I was reading on a screen. So for those of you who haven't yet put this book on your radar, I'll be seeing you, which is also one of my favorite songs, and if I had drunk the gin, I would sing it, is a memoir about Elizabeth's parents and their, what you call their outsized love affair with each other, and also their decline. So like really big themes of parents and aging parents and love stories. And I just, of course, on like the first, sentences, I found things to plug into. So I have so many questions about it. But can you tell readers a little bit more about what prompted you to write this memoir?
Sure. Um, Dealing with aging parents is something that if you're lucky enough to have your parents live a long time, you're going to have to deal with. And it is such a complex mix of many strong emotions, including anger, frustration, confusion, but also humor and grace and great love. And it was so big. And I don't know about you as a writer, but when something is so big inside me, the way I get it out is by writing about it. So I did that to get to, because it was getting so crowded in here in my soul. So I got it out onto the page. And then I realized after I'd written it that what I really hoped this book would do is to provide my experience so people could bounce their own experience off of, and it would let them know that it's okay if you just want to murder somebody. It's okay if you weep and weep and weep. It's okay if you don't understand why your parents are changing their mind back and forth. Yes, I want to move out of the house. No, I don't want to move out of the house. And all that, as in all things like this, life doesn't stop. You may have a minor crisis in that your parents are faltering badly, but then life goes on in other ways too. So there are attendant catastrophes that happen, and the book is meant to be a kind of cheerleader for getting through these hard times, so that in that respect it applies not only to aging parents but to any huge event that can happen like that in your life. I have to tell you that, you know how when authors go on tour and people say, what book do you like best? And they say, oh, this one. And everybody goes, oh, you're just saying that because it's the new one. This is not my favorite book. The Story of Arthur True is my favorite book, but I think this is the best thing I've ever written. So I will stand by that. And I think that if you pick it up and read a few pages, you'll get engaged. I read a very brief part the last time there was a book festival that I went to, which was about 2,000 years ago, and it was from the end. And the way I can tell that I've written a book to my satisfaction is if I read it again and again and again and I still like it. And that's what happened with this one. Uh-oh.
I muted myself because somebody was knocking on my back door, because it's Minnesota. People do that here instead of like making appointments like months in advance to come over. I have no idea who it was, but it might be like Paul Bunyan or something. Um,
My ox.
I actually almost like went to look. It's like, I want my ox back. Okay. I love this story. And I think there's so many things about it that strike a chord with me. One being that you'll admit to having a favorite child, like among your work, or not the favorite child. And I wanted to ask more about Arthur Truelove too, so readers can be introduced to that book if they haven't read it yet, and the continuation of his series. But why do you think, because I have this assessment too. Somebody asked me recently, I haven't read any of your work, which is your best novel? And then wrote, ha ha, right? And I was like, don't say ha ha. I think I know which one it is. And because this friend was a writing teacher, I could tell him candidly, this is the one I think is the best. Why do you think I'll Be Seeing You is your best work?
I began being published as a nonfiction writer, and there is a kind of ease and fluidity in my nonfiction writing that I hope is also in fiction, but it's not as easy for me to write fiction as it is nonfiction. And there is a kind of precision in word choice and phrasing, and a kind of accidental structure that emerged because, of course, this is nonfiction. So I wasn't saying, oh, I think this scene should follow this. It just happened, and it made its own story. But I think that a friend just wrote to me about this, a wonderful writer named Jessica Treadway, who, by the way, has a book out called The Gretchen Question, which is such a good book club book. So much to talk about. Anyway, Jessica wrote me and she said, a lot of times when I read memoirs, I find that I can't relate to them because the authors are talking about things that just don't pertain to me at all. But I could relate to this. She said it was so abundant, the things in here that I could relate to. So I think that helps make for a good reading experience.
I love that. So I'm going to ask you to move a little bit closer to us if you can, because I just got a message from our fabulous producer that you got a little quiet. So you have to project, as we used to say in elucidation classes. Good. How is that, everybody? Is that better? Say something.
Spinach in my teeth?
No. And I think you're not quite as quiet now. Yeah, Jessica Treadway is a great writer, and The Gretchen Question is wonderful, and anybody who has a book club should read it. I actually deviated from writing fiction for the first time ever to write a memoir. And I found it a little bit easier in the sense that I didn't have to create the plot, which for me is the hardest part, because as you said, it happened. And I personally love, as a reader, reading career novelists' essays and memoirs. Sort of gets me through the tougher parts of my own life. I feel as though these people who I so admire because they've created these vivid imaginary worlds that help show the emotional truths of people's lives, they then show the emotional truths of their own lives, and it acts as like almost like a rope over a chasm that I'm pulling myself across, like bit by bit, right? For instance, Anne Patchett, who so many of us revere as a novelist, my favorite work of hers is an essay collection called This is the Story of a Happy Marriage.
Me too.
Right? I love this. And she talks about being a dog mom and about getting married and about becoming a writer and about training to be in the police academy and, all these things. But when my mom was sick, when she was mortally sick, I was gravitating not to fiction for escape, but to essays so that I could pull myself across the chasm. And when I was reading I'll Be Seeing You, it was so fascinating to me to know your work very conversantly as a novelist, and to see the same generosity of vision at work, in the amplification of beautiful daily things, but then also to have these moments of connection where it was like this very simple statement where your soul is just laid bare. It's like a wire connecting with another wire. It's like me connecting with you as the reader to the writer, like, and one of them was about partnership, like early on in the memoir. saying like my parents' love story was so outsized and so wonderful, and I have failed at partnerships or failed at relationships, and even in my relationship now, which I know is a long-term happy partnership, like I fail all the time and he's very patient. And I just thought, what remarkable clarity of self-assessment, and what it was just stated so simply, and I admire that more than I can say. Do you feel that there is a different process for you of writing? Is it a relief to put things down and not sort of mask them in fiction? And I'm going to ask you again to speak up a little bit in your answers. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that. So one thing I noticed, and this is sort of alongside the question you just asked, one thing I noticed in going back to nonfiction after having written so much fiction is that in the same way that metaphor works in fiction, it works in nonfiction. So there's a part of I'll Be Seeing You when I went to a concert. I went to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and it was a beautiful concert, and I was sitting behind an older couple, and he was really old, and when it came time for intermission, it was very difficult for him to get up out of his chair and get up to his walker and go up the aisle. When they came back from intermission, they sat at the end of the row so that he wouldn't have to struggle climbing over people, and so that he could get a head start. So that when the concert was over, and it was so, he was still such a handsome guy. He must have been in his 90s, so well dressed, and his wife too. And he put his arm around her, which just about killed me dead. And I could see at different points during the concert that they were looking at each other to see, are you enjoying this? I hope you're enjoying this. So that was a love story playing out before my eyes. And when he got up to leave, everyone was still clapping. They were taking their bows, but he had to get a head start. And I wanted it to be that the people who were saying, bravo, bravo, were saying it for him, that he still came out, that he still went to the concert, that he made it up the aisle in his walker. And of course, I was thinking about my parents, what they were going through, and bravo for them, that in the midst of all this, they still held on to that essential core of themselves, because it got very rough. People got crabby, including my mother to my father, me to my mother. My sister and I ganged up on my mother. I was not proud of that behavior, but I confess it because it's true. And I think that it's an integral part in presenting a difficult situation like this, that you own up to your own mistakes. And I hope that someone will read that and say, okay, so check that. Remember to do something before you get to that level of anger.
I'm not muted anymore. It's hard I don't think anybody behaves like a saint when you're dealing with a parent who is sick or who is failing. I mean, and if they are behaving like a saint, then nobody really wants to know about those people, right? It's such a crucible to go through. And I think what you're talking about with whether it's fiction or nonfiction is exactly why I read and exactly why I write, that I hope to reflect some of my experience back to people, whether it's through my own voice or through a character's experiences, and they feel less alone.
Yeah.
It can be really lonely. So fiction and nonfiction helps me feel less alone in whatever I'm going through. And if I'm really in pain, I will turn to a book, because there is some wisdom there. If you had one anecdote to share about your parents that's illustrative of the love that they had for each other that you're exploring in I'll Be Seeing You, what would it be?
Well, in the book, I guess there are a lot of them in their whole lives, but in the book, my dad got Alzheimer's, and it was a burden for my mother. It was at the point when it wasn't horrible yet. It was just that he would say these things that you would go, what? But we were going to take my mother out because he was saying people are breaking into the car and that hooligans stole the lid of the garbage cans, and he was trying to block the closet so that they couldn't come in, things like that. But for the most part, he was doing okay. So my sister and I wanted to take my mother out because she needed a break, or take him out with us because my mother needed a break. Sorry. We were going to take him clothes shopping, and he said no. He needed clothes desperately because he'd lost so much weight. He said no, I don't want to go. We said, why don't you want to go? And our feelings were kind of hurt because we were such swell broads, and why wouldn't he want to spend the afternoon with us? And finally he said, your mother might need something, and he had so little muscle mass. I mean, and my mother said, what might happen to me if you go? And he said, you might fall down the stairs. I mean, he was looking out for her always. And even when they moved into the place they finally ended up living in, he would take his mobile scooter and park it against the door at night so no one could get in and hurt his wife. So he lost his mother at a very early age. I think he was 3 when his mother died. He was raised by a taciturn housekeeper who made him eat all his dinner. If he wanted dessert, then flip the plate over and eat the dessert on that side. And his father was a very withdrawn, cold man. I never saw my grandfather smile. So that's what he came from. So when he met my mother, who was kind of lively and fun and pretty, and she was his North Star and remained so for all of his life. They had what my agent describes as a Reagan-esque marriage where there was no room for anyone else, really.
I love that. What was that like to be? I have so many questions. Like, how do you find love like that? And especially if you're raised by a taciturn, plate flipping housekeeper. But what is it like to be a child watching this marriage if it doesn't have room for other people in it?
I've talked to my brother and my sister about this. It was as though we were all our own little planets. They were the sun and the moon, and we were our own little planets. We all sort of fended for ourselves. I told my brother once, it must not have been a very flattering thing to say. I said, all through high school, I don't remember you. Where were you? He could probably say the same back to me, but I think that it teaches you to ask yourself for things that you need to have. And it also, as I say, very early on in the book, it sets an impossibly high standard. I began to see that I would never have a relationship like that. That's really tough stuff, trying to have a relationship like they did. I would need to be a much better person and a more giving and generous person to have a relationship like they did. More patient. My mom was pretty patient because he was scary. He was really scary when I was growing up. He was an Army guy, a lifer in the Army. And man, when he said jump, you said how high. And it took a long time for us to reconcile the fear that I had of him growing up into the outsized love that I ended up having for him.
And he had big shoulders too, right? So he was an imposing guy even when he got old. That's something that stuck with me from reading the memoir. It's like big guy. I love the sorry, go ahead.
But he gentled down. He gentled down, which is, I think, is one of the best things about aging, is that you do lose some of the rough edges. You do, even if you're an impatient person like me, you get a little more patient. And you have a little better perspective. And I feel that older people really have a lot to offer. It's an aggravation to me that older people aren't given the attention that they deserve because they have so much to offer.
I agree with that. And I agree with the gentling down of sometimes difficult personalities or very loudly broadcasting personalities. Even my mom, who was like Aurora Greenway from Terms of Endearment, except with red hair. In her last year, I remember she was very impatient. She was like a toddler. Like she had this attention span of like a 2-year-old, which is why I always let her read my first drafts of my books, because if she could sit through a whole book, then I knew it was a good book. But in her last year, there were times where she could sit still. And one of my favorite memories of her is sitting with her in a car. We were going to go to the beach and she couldn't make it to the beach. So we stayed in the parking lot in the car and we watched in Florida some parrots. There were these green parrots in a tree. And my mom, who could never sit more than 5 minutes in her life without going and throwing a party somewhere, just like sat and smoked her cigarettes, but she was like, clutching to the grave and, said like, aren't they beautiful? Aren't they just so beautiful? They're so phosphorescent, like that green color. And I thought, wow, who are you? Like, thank you for giving me this moment. I always thought that might be there. And I know you write a lot and with great tenderness about characters who are older, like Arthur Truelove, for instance. And is that one of the reasons that you love Arthur Truelove so much and this series? Can you talk a little bit about that book?
Yeah, one of the I told you a little about my grandparents, and also I was raised an army brat, so I lived 6 years in Germany and I never saw my grandparents, and I did not live in the state that they did, this being my mother's parents. I just didn't see them. So I didn't have a lot of experience with older people. But when I first went into nursing, many people know I was a registered nurse before I became a writer. The first job I had was working in a nursing home, and it was all old people, and I loved them. I just adored them. I liked their cardigan sweaters and their high top shoes, and I loved how long they live and the stories they tell me. And it was there that I first got this great love of older people. So I put them a lot in my books, older people. And Arthur Truelove is sort of the old person to end all old people for me. He had a sense of humor. He'd been through a lot. He was compassionate. He was wise. He was so giving. He didn't have any ego about things. So it was a pleasure to be around him. And I wrote his character, and I wrote about that fictional town because for years now, I know I wanted to compartmentalize this and not bring any sadness in, but let me just briefly say that we've been going through a hard time, not just because of COVID, but for a long time, for many years. Every day I would cry when I read the paper, literally. So I needed to create a place where I could go to where people were kind to one another. And so I wrote the story of Arthur Truelove because of that. I wrote somewhere I wanted to be. And when I finished it, I still needed to be somewhere like that. So I wrote a second one and then a third one. And now I'm working on a fourth one because I still need to be there. So what was the question?
I don't know. I'm enraptured by this. So who even knows? I was just thinking about Arthur Truelove. You did something in that book that I always wanted to do and didn't really have the chops to do, I don't think, or the imagination. And Ann Tyler did it too, which is to take somebody who's catapulted out of her own life and into a new place and letting her feel her way around. And that's how she becomes acquainted with the people in this lovely town, which is not, I should point out, like our town. Like there are people who are having struggles and conundra in this town. It's one of the things that I like about your work is you don't shy away from things that are hard, as I said, but there also is pie. And pie matters. And what kind of pie it is matters. And if it has lard in the crust, it matters most of all. And the food matters, and kindness and love, and people being uncertain and feeling their way along. And I think that's so masterful to be able to completely envision from a tabula rasa, like what a character's new life might look like. And I just haven't had sort of the confidence to do that in my own work, but I think it's such a lovely sort of escapist like thing to do. One of our readers asked while we were having this conversation, how you access the emotional cores of your characters in these situations and have them ring so true. And do you use your own experiences or do you apply like your own writing advice to your own work, like your advice on craft? Like how do you do it? How do you make this magic?
You know, I feel like writing is like acting on paper. So you go within yourself to become another in the same way that you do when you're acting. You try to leave yourself behind and inhabit fully this character that you're writing. And if you're having a rapid fire conversation back and forth, it can be hard because you're sort of schizophrenic going back and forth, be this person, be that person, be this person. But it feels very much like that. Naturally, you draw on parts of yourself for every character you create, um, in every book that you write, probably. And I do that. But I guess I would like to bring a measure of compassion and empathy to every character I write, even the quote bad ones, because that's what makes them real, because that's how people are. Even the worst people have some pocket of grace inside them somewhere, and it has to show. It has to show, even if it's just a little glimmer. Um, and we all, as human beings, have such a complex range of emotions. It's one of the most wonderful things about us, the way that we can be so kind and so selfish and so happy and so sad. So we've got the tools inside, or the machinery inside, maybe more accurately to say, to let us feel those things. And so we can draw on those things as writers.
Do you feel like we were talking about sort of feeling like your own planet in your family's constellation? I think I just mixed astronomical metaphors there. But do you think that sort of observational position maybe in your own family contributed to being a writer and having like the sort of like lonely planet feeling? Writers talk a lot about being on the outside of things, or feeling like they're on the outside of things, and looking
Yeah.
in and saying, how does this work, or how do you fit into this social group, or how do you be friends with people, or how do you walk down the street? I mean, I remember this growing up. I was one of those little freaky kids on the playground who was like always like picking up rocks and making up stories, and nobody would talk to me. Which is fine because I had imaginary people to talk to. But I feel as though that sort of element of loneliness, do you think that honed a little bit what you were just talking about, which is the access to your own emotions? Like,
I do, but I also think it's just something that you're born with. If you're a writer, you are born with the habit of noticing and the inclination to notice. I always think of that Woody Allen thing that he said, I forget in what movie it was, but he's talking about two trains passing each other. And on one train, they're having this rollicking party. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And on the other train, everybody's just sitting quietly. And he's saying, that's me. I'm the watcher. I watch. And I have to say that even at this ripe old age, I'm still most comfortable hanging on the periphery of the room and watching what's going on, rather than being involved, and God forbid on the dance floor, because I'm such a bad dancer. See, people say, oh, you just say that everybody can dance. I cannot. I was at Tipitina's in New Orleans, and a guy asked me to dance, and I said, I can't dance. You can. I said, no, I really can't dance. And he took me out on the dance floor, and after about 30 seconds, he said, wow, you really can't dance. And he let me go.
did you step on him? You stepped on his feet?
Yes,
Punch him
that
in the
was
face?
one of the things. Yeah.
I think that's a skill. I think it's an anti-skill. I once cleared a whole nightclub by getting up on the stage when I was on like some mind-altering substance.
Really?
19, I'm like, I'm gonna dance in that cage, because one does at 19. And I got in the cage and I was like, whoop, whoop, nightclub cleared out. I mean, it's a gift. I like saved all these people from being consumed by a fire or something, right? So I mean, that's how I choose to think of it. Speaking of observing, I noticed that you do this, or the characters do it in all of your books, where they will look at a character, at any person their vision lands on, like a nurse or a diner waitress or a bird eating a worm or a flower, and conjecture as to what's happening inside that person. Do you do this like every day, like still, just as a sort of a habit, a reflex?
It won't stop, Jenna. It won't stop. Yeah, go past the guy making the pizza in the window, and I could watch that for hours.
Well, again, you're a better writer than I am, because I'd be like, ooh, pizza. I'm very distracted by food. I'm like, oh, who cares what he's thinking? There's a pizza. Do you ever, and this is just a sort of a weirdo writer question, but do you ever get a feeling about some people that's stronger than other people, like real life people, where you feel like they're actually sort of broadcasting to you, like what they're like, almost like a mood or an emotion?
Yeah. Deep dark secrets of crazy writers. Yeah, absolutely. You can just walk past, well, I shouldn't say you, but I bet it's you too. But I can walk past a person and it's like, what was that? There's just something. It's their aura, or it's their, I don't know what it is, but it is as though they're loud and they're quiet. You can really, you get attracted to certain things in a very strong way.
Yes, and it's almost like a taste, like a mental taste, and you're like, oh, that's what it's like to be that person, and then it goes away. Like it's a strange. I don't even know if I can quantify it or put it in words and use it, but it gives me hope that maybe, I mean, I could be just making all of this bleep up, because again, that's what I do. But I feel as though, like, I love that about what you do and what I do, is that we get to
And it's
imagine that we can translate these things into words.
and for me, it's a kind of wondering what it's like to be, what is it like to be that person, and the way to find out, to the extent that we think we do, is to write it, to become that person. And then you think you know, and you could be very wrong, but you answer it to your satisfaction anyway.
Yes, it's super fun. You get to go into other people's skins and walk around for a while. You ever have outfits, right? And bikini bodies. Do you ever? What is it like for you to write characters you don't like that much, who maybe the pocket of grace? Everybody has pockets of grace. I might, I'm sitting on my own lips not to ask political questions about that statement, but when you have characters who have only tiny pockets of grace in them, how is it to write those characters? And then also, what is it like for you to write male characters?
Well, writing male characters is just, it was surprising to me to feel as though this isn't so hard. I think as someone who observes personalities and sees consistencies in certain types of personalities, namely men, it wasn't as hard as I thought. And of course, I'm going to be gracious and say that they have the same, they have the same difficulties we do, not exactly the same. And so it's not that much of a stretch. And then about the difficult characters, I'll tell you that when I wrote the story of Arthur Truelove, there's a woman named Lucille Howard, who I meant to be the sweetest old lady. And she said, not on your life, not me. And she's really a pain. And I loved writing her. I was so happy when scenes of her came along because they were so much fun to write. Sometimes it's fun to write people you don't like because they say the most outrageous things, and sometimes it's like the Howard Stern phenomenon, like they're saying things that you might be thinking yourself or wish you could say. And I think that readers, myself included, often really like reading these awful characters, the one you love to hate, so to speak. I think the difficulty is in balance, so that you're not overwhelming a reader with all this. I don't like to write really negative books or books that are sad without some sort of redemption. And I don't like to write violence, or somebody killing somebody. Some people do it really, really well, and some people like to read that stuff, my mother included. She loved those scary books, thrillers, rippers, she loved that stuff. But I don't. I think it's hard enough being here, so I try to provide something else.
There's some respite. I know when I read Stephen King religiously, but I have to read it like this, because I actually don't read it for the supernatural or the horror elements of it. I read it for the psychology. Like, I think he's really good with people. But I'm with you. We run a Mighty Mystery series on a Mighty Blaze every Tuesday, and my friend Sarah DeVello interviews all the mystery writers. And is talking about, like the sort of like stabbings and killing. I mean, the writers talk about the psychological underpinnings of their characters. That is interesting, but I can't read a thriller plot for that reason. Like I can watch Lifetime. That's about it. I can watch a woman get pushed off an interior balcony. That's about like as far as as far as I can go, Speaking
That's so great about books, though, right? Is that there is something for everyone, and I love Linda Berry, who writes graphic novels. There's graphic novels, there's horror, there's thrillers, there's poetry, which is such a balm to the soul, especially these days. There is something for you to love, no matter what you like in reading.
Yes, always. And what do you return to? Like I return to you when I need to read something that is nourishing. Who do you read when you are wanting to nourish yourself, or just like who do you return to? Who are the writers you return to?
I would say there are two. First and foremost, Alice Munro is one, the Canadian primarily short story writer who cannot write a bad sentence, and has such psychological acuity. She is astonishing. And I try not to think about how the sausage is made, as you were talking about before. I try not to do that, but I can't help it when I read her. I find myself saying, how did she do that in this one sentence that she presented this whole world of personality? So she's right at the top of the list. Also, Ann Tyler. Ann Tyler is a kind of literary aphrodisiac for me. When I read her, I get so excited. I feel like writing, but I love her. I love her little oddities and her language and the eccentric characters that she creates. There are short story writers I really adore. There are essayists like William Maxwell and E.B. White, who are, it's like butter on bread. I mean, they're just so smooth and rich to read. And again, poetry, I go back to over and over because it soothes me. There's a poet named Barbara Crooker, and I love her poetry. She shows up all the time on the Writer's Almanac. If you ever read that or subscribe to it. Also, Jane Hirschfield, Mary Oliver, Ted Kooser, Billy Collins, all of these are very accessible poets. I think sometimes when people hear poetry, they think, oh my God, no. But if you don't like poetry, it's just because you haven't found your poet yet. And above all, for me, the poets I like best are real storytellers in such a compact, beautiful way, and so soothing with things about nature. And so on, which, by the way, if I could plug one of my own books, which I hate doing, I really hate promoting my own books, because I'm waiting for my mom to say, well, don't we find ourselves special? But these little books, Happy to Be Here is the latest one. There's Make Someone Happy, Still Happy, and Happy to Be Here. These are compilations of Facebook posts which were done at the request of readers. When enough people asked, I finally said, well, fine, okay, I'll do it. And they're like little chapbooks, and you can read just one little entry, and they're meant to make you happy. They're meant to give you relief. Even if I write about the death of my dog, Homer, which I did, and Still Happy, it's still meant to lift you up in the end. So that's what the poets do for me. It's a very succinct way of,
I think that too. I kind of came to poetry in a sort of a back-asswards way. We learned it in high school, and it was all of the, sort of Byronic poets and the sonnets and the iambic pentameter. And I had found that sort of dry. And the first poet I plugged into is not actually known for her poetry. It was Erica Jong, who wrote a collection of poems called Becoming Light, and they were narrative. So I wasn't thinking necessarily about iambic pentameter. I was thinking about what it felt like to inhabit the body of a woman, and she's telling a story. It's just in a different way, in a very encapsulated kind of snapshot way. And I feel as though a lot of the poets you're talking about do the same thing. They do it with nature, like Mary Oliver. I have, plastered all over my walls everywhere. Yeah. But they tell stories. They're just telling them in a more condensed way. And the literary aphrodisiac that you mentioned in terms of Ann Tyler, I sometimes get that from poetry. It's like a road gets applied to my temples, and I think, oh my God, I now have to write a poem. I can do that. And then it grows into a story, it grows into a book. And so I love that that's a source of inspiration for you. I wanted to talk about the happy books, and I also need to track our time because I can talk to you for 6 hours, but I probably kept you for like already, 5.5 hours. But I'll track the time and take some questions from people. 2 questions I had is
Jenna, let me share. I'm so sorry. I have to share this with you because of what you just said. Listen to this quote by Ted Kooser. And you do this, by the way, as a writer. We are learning the way in which stories end, how they drift into near silence, yet leave an after ringing like a bell. And for me, the best stories, yours included, do that. So the story's over and it resonates on. You keep thinking about it. Isn't that a good quote? I love that.
It's a really good quote. Thank you for like running over me. I was like getting sort of puppyish and like bouncing around. Like I have so many questions.
No, I'm sorry for interrupting.
No. I love that. I would much rather hear that and like take a breath and think about the ringing of the literary bell. I think that is beautiful. And those vibrations hopefully lodge in people where they keep ringing and reverberating. Do you read poetry every day? Do you read every day?
I read every day, definitely, and I read poetry almost every day. I've got probably 3 different books of poetry at my bedside, and I have a bazillion of them all over the house. But the ones I mentioned are my favorites.
I love totally like vitamins. They're like that sort of like literary nourishment. And I wanted to talk about the happy books. You are actually sending these to people, yes? Like people can get them through you. Is that my understanding?
Yes. Bill and I go on these self-made tours every summer, and it's so much fun. We just say, are there any libraries in the state of Missouri that would like us to come? And then they say, yeah, you can come. So we go to these places, and in those instances, I bring books to sell. And of course, we didn't do that this summer. So yeah, I have not many. The thing about the happy books is I publish them, so they're not. All my books are in bookstores, but these books are not usually in bookstores, nor can you always get them from bookstores. But I think I have 11 of Happy to Be Here, and then I have 1 little lonely copy of Make Someone Happy. So, and I think I have 50 of first edition Story of Arthur Truelove. And so here's the A Mighty Blaze special deal of the day, ding, 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 is that the first 2 people who, there will be instructions, I think, for what you need to do to, if you would like to get a book. The first 2 people who request the Story of Arthur Truelove will get it for free, including postage and all that. And then the rest of you.
That is crazy. And you're signing them, yes?
Yeah. And then for the rest of the people, you can get it for $20, which includes postage, which means you're paying about $15 for a first edition signed, personalized hardcover. That's a good deal.
It's a good deal, people. And it's coming from this study, like Elizabeth Nancy Myers looking study. So you should be paying $15,000 for this book. And it is now 150% discounted. I just made that up. But I'm like not a math person. Yeah, that is very generous. That is very, I'm going to ask, and I have a viewer question also, but I wanted to ask about what inspired you to put the happy posts from Facebook into the books that you've created. I often think Facebook for me is almost like a journal in some sense. It's like where I've been, and it's a visual journal, and it almost acts like poetry, except I'm not aspiring to be poetic, but they're like these snapshots of life, which is. And all of your posts, which I follow avidly, are like these mini essays. Like you and Joyce Maynard also does this, where you will post these mini essays about your life every day. So readers, if you're not following Elizabeth yet on Facebook, you should, because you get like this fabulous content. Like, but it's like, so what inspired you to put them all together in these books?
Well, I should say it's not every day, but it's a lot. I kind of never shut up. So I made books out of Facebook posts because one of the people on Facebook said, "Would you please do a book of these because I'm tired of printing them out and they don't look nice." And I thought, "Oh, that's so nice. I'm never going to do that." And then someone else asked, and then someone else asked, and finally I thought, "Well, okay, fine. I'll do that." And so my friend Phyllis designed the covers, and she did all the business part that I'm so terrible at. Um, so you can get them from Amazon for $12, or if you want a signed, personalized, the instructions will be there. But I did it by reader request, actually. And I asked my publisher, "Do you want to publish my Facebook post?" And they said no.
No, no, we don't actually ever want to do that, and don't ever ask us again. Yeah, I know.
Right?
My agent is.
They've actually done quite well. So
Like because people love happiness and they love reading what you write,
great,
and we do want these keepsakes of like the things that you
and
write.
it's, I think most essentially what they are is a reminder of what joy and beauty there is in ordinary life. So that if I have a conversation with a kid, or I see some event in nature, or I have a really good recipe that I'm dying to share, and we really have to cook a meal sometime, Jenna. That would be
Yes,
so.
yes, we
Uh,
must with rhubarb and
or
sugar.
insights that I have into something. It's all there. Sometimes my dogs talk, and I'm very sorry that Austin made no appearance whatsoever. He won't even come upstairs. He must have heard me say something bad about him.
No,
But
I
anyway,
heard you
that's
use
all.
the
That's
Austin, but
all.
you're like, Austin, Austin, where are you? He's like, nowhere.
I know,
You see
Austin.
me? I will get Henry, my puppy, at the end of this. I don't know where he is, and it's very quiet in the house. So obviously, a shoe somewhere is being destroyed. But I'll bring him over here to show him to you. 3 questions. One from a viewer, which is we were sort of talking about things that are like everyday things that are beautiful, which I think are the vibrance in your work. What do you do to make your nonfiction especially vibrant, like as a journalist, as an essayist, as a memoirist? Like, what advice do you give to people who are writing nonfiction to make work vibrant?
There's a wonderful quote by a photographer, Walker Percy, about it's something like, "If the thing is there, why there it is." And I think I'm mangling the quote, but the point is that all of this is all around us all the time. And there's a quote by Degas, which I do remember, which is, "Art is not what you see, but what you make others see." And so I think it's a matter of presenting on a platter. In some ways, as a writer, you're still that little kid bringing home a dandelion bouquet to your mom and saying, "Look, see." So if I see something beautiful or funny, or something that really instructs me, I want to share it. So you can state it so plainly. I think it was Garrison Keillor who said, "You don't have to gild the lily. All you have to do is say rhubarb pie, and the reader gets it." So I think it's a kind of service that we're lucky as writers to be able to provide others with, this kind of going out with our begging basket, as they say, and filling it up with things and then offering it to people. And we are so gratified when people see and say, "Oh, I knew that was there, but you reminded me."
Totally. And I was thinking how lucky when you were talking we are to have this audience, so that when we do have like our bouquet of dandelions, or like the light shining off a wall in a certain way, or the smell of gasoline or pavement after it rains, or like any, or rhubarb pie for that matter, we have people who we can bring into who appreciate it. Like that is such a joy for me to always have, to feel like I always have that sort of audience.
Did you think you ever would, Jenna? Did you think you'd be a writer?
Well, yeah, I did. Because it was all I ever wanted to be, and all I ever felt that I was any good at being was bringing the things to people and saying like, "Look, a dead frog," and like, or whatever, which is, the kind of stuff I write about. Um, it was really all I ever wanted to do. So I thought, if I can't do this, then I'm going to be a sort of a worthless and lonely person. And that's why I feel so especially gratified that there are people who will look at like the things that I bring them. And I never forget that. I never lose sight of that.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that you
No,
would?
I always wrote. I started out writing this god awful poetry, which I submitted when I was 9. But I never thought I would be a writer. I thought you had to be a man and have an English accent, and it was it was impossible for me to think that could actually happen. But I became a nurse, and then I wanted to stay home with my daughters. So a magazine, Parents Magazine, was having an essay contest, which I entered and won, and began submitting essays to that magazine as well as virtually every other magazine on the market. And that's how I did that for 10 years, is wrote essays. And that's what got me started. But no, like you, I am always daily grateful for the fact that I can be a writer. It is, I never dreamed of it, that it could really happen.
So
I
how did
still
you
feel
get?
like a fake, you know?
Yeah, the imposter syndrome. We talk about that a lot. We all
Like,
have.
are you the Jenna Blum? And you go, what are you talking about?
No, right. I know when I hear myself introduced at events, I always say, well, that's a hard act to follow because that doesn't, really, it's like the person they're describing and the person
Where
who's
is she?
in the yoga pants. I'm just, right. I'm looking, I'm like, me talking to me, Woody Allen moments. But yeah, I mean, it is a little different from the person who's like bringing the dandelions and saying, like, I hope I made them pretty enough for you to look at, and like sitting around in my disgusting yoga pants day after day. And trying to make that happen is such a far cry from the sort of accolades. What was it like? What is the most surprising moment of your writer success life? Like, I always want to ask you about like the Oprah book club pick, because when you say Oprah at one of these events, people go, ooh,
Yeah, that was a good day.
That's
Yeah.
a good day, right?
That wasn't the best day. That wasn't the best day.
Okay, tell me the best day.
Best day was I had written 90 pages of my first novel. And I thought I had something, but I wasn't sure. And some days I would read it and say, ooh, this is really good. And other days I would read it and say, oh, this is so embarrassing. But I sent it to my agent, and she sent it to 2 publishers on a Friday. And on the following Monday, they both called wanting to buy it. That was the best day. That was just validation, in an extreme validation. I didn't even get dressed that day. I couldn't get dressed. All I could do is walk around and wonder that this happened.
Could you even believe it? I mean, did it take you some time to be like,
what? No, I mean, I thought, I guess I thought it was kind of real, especially after I went to New York and met with both editors and decided who I wanted to go with. And then it became very real. But there is, I think, for me and a lot of writers, still an air of unreality about the whole thing. We tend to be very shy, introspective people, writers, really. And when we write about those things that you so beautifully described, they are really for us. They are for us to transfer from what's in here out there, because it has to come out. And then the second part of the process is getting it out there and getting into publishing, which has its ups and downs. But what's very beautiful is when you have that moment of understanding that, yes, that's what I wanted to say. That's it right there on the page. That's it. Nothing matches that.
no, it's really good. And do you ever have those moments where something lands on you? Like you're trying to say something and it actually matches what you see in your head, which is a moment of triumph, right? But do you ever have a moment when you're in the process of like being the furnace that is like sort of smelting out this creation, and all of a sudden a line seems to come from nowhere and lands on
Yes.
you? Fantastic.
Not just a line either. Sometimes I'll write a whole page of prose that I'll take out of the printer. I don't remember writing it. It's as though you lose yourself to this trance and it just comes flowing out. That's a good writing day.
That is such a good, I had like one of those in my study upstairs here in my house in Minnesota. I remember writing about Grand Central Station, and it was a blocking scene. Like the character has to go from one point in the station to get on a train. So it was this throwaway, I thought it would be like a paragraph. And when I was in the middle of writing it, this whole sort of hall of echoes came to me, like this sort of hall of memories that the character has, and sort of stirred around in the nave of the roof of Grand Central Station. And I was like, whoa, where did that come from? Felt like I was transcribing.
Yes.
Those are my favorite moments, like these moments of like total grace that you're not actually looking for. They don't fit into the structure of the book necessarily. My whole writing class is like, aha, something outside the outline. But these moments that land on you, and I find, for me at least, they're the ones that readers respond to the most.
Yes, they're the truest.
Yeah, and they say, this line spoke to me so much, but when I say thank you, I feel like an imposter then, because I don't feel like I was responsible for coming up with that line, right? But I confessed that, and I was like, this is what grace feels like for a writer.
Yes, exactly.
On you, and then you can give them to other people, and you have no idea where they come from. Is so amazing, right? Do you remember? Okay, so here's a question. Your story about going to New York and meeting with the two editors when you were like a very young writer for your first book. Do you remember what you wore? And do you remember what it was like to walk into the publishing houses that day? Were you just like, I'm in Oz?
Well, I went to restaurants. So I remember that the editor, Kate Medina from Random House, is the editor I chose, and it was Cafe des Artistes, and I couldn't eat a bite. I was so overwhelmed, and I apologize. And I'm such a pig. I mean, I'm such an eater, and I could not eat this beautiful meal because I was just up to here with excitement. And I'm afraid I probably wore one of those, was it called Liberty dresses? The little prints, and then I'm not a good dresser.
I'm sure it was beautiful. I asked this because I remember going to meet with my agent for the first time, and I wore all black. And of course, it was in New York, and it was summer.
Chic.
It was not chic because it was summer, and it was 9,000 degrees and 900% humidity. And I was an hour early because I was so nervous, and I walked around the block in front of the agency to kill time. And so by the time I got up to meet my agent, I was like dripping with sweat, and I was like, "Hello, let me hug you." She still took a chance on me, but it has taken me 18 years to eat in front of my agent, honestly. And she is French, and she's like, Jenna, you have to eat something. I have ordered us a brie. I know you love cheese. So I'm like, finally, like I knew that we were actually friends as well as industry, comrades, because I could eat in front of her and be like, give me some of that bread from your plate. I would like to hear a favorite dog story of yours also, since we're both dog moms, like avid dog moms.
Oh man, tell me yours, because that caught me by surprise.
Okay. Something of favorite. Well, the reason I was thinking of that is I was thinking about your happy books and your essay about Homer, or the post about Homer. And that's actually not a very happy moment, but it was really meaningful to me when I read the story about, or the Facebook post about Homer's passing. It was helpful to me. And for those of you who haven't read it, and you should, Elizabeth's post about Homer was about his last day, I think, and you knew it was his last day, and so you went and laid in the grass with him and talked to him, and just about your journey together. And when I read that, my old boy Woodrow was like, I want to say 14, and he made it to 15, but I kind of knew that his crossing was coming, and I felt that whole time like I was going toward Niagara in a barrel. Like, I had survived other things, but I was like, I don't honestly know if I'm going to survive this losing this creature. And reading that about Homer, of course, I was like, oh God, but I also felt so much less alone because I read that post, which is exactly what we've been talking about. Like, that's why you read, that's why you write, to sort of reach a hand out across difficult experiences and say you're less alone. And it gave me the courage to say, you know what, I know this is coming, but like every day I have with him is a good day. Like even the last day when you lie in the grass, it's a good day. So, and I will also something like awfully tear jerky, but the behind the scenes on this is that Elizabeth was going to come to my apartment and meet Woodrow when he was very, very old, when he was 15. And so I had made a cake because I'm like, there will be dog and there will be cake, and you finally get to meet this ancient ancient creature. And the morning you were supposed to come over, it was the morning that he passed. And so I remember texting you at like 4 a.m. and being like, I'm so sorry. It's not a great time. Like the dog is dying. But I felt like you were with me in that moment because you knew what it was like to go through this. And so that's not my happiest dog moment, I guess, but it's like one of my favorites because somebody who's not physically with you can still be with you in a time of great loss. So I thank you for that. It was really amazing.
Oh, I'm so sorry I didn't get to meet him, but I got so much out of your posts about him. I think one of the things that helps when our dogs get old and it's inevitable is to understand how much smarter they are about it than we, and how I really felt like, you know, I wrote in that book that I was telling him, you know, Homer, when this is over, you're not going to hurt anymore, and you're going to, you know, blah, blah. And he said, if you need to think that, that's okay. But I'm all right. I'm with you. I love you. I had a good life. Oh God, I'm going to get going again. But here's a good memory is when I got my first golden retriever, he was in this batch of sort of unwanted puppies, and I saw a picture of them all, and I was thinking, oh, they're all so cute. How am I going to decide? How will I decide? When I got to the house, there was one puppy who had commandeered every single toy in the room. There was a stack of toys over there with a little puppy standing there like, don't even think about it. And I said, that one.
You chose like the rapacious one, right? Like the one with the lust for life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That, I mean, I would choose like the little quiet one in the corner or something, you know, and you're just like, I want the one who's like,
yeah, I know. I would choose that. I would choose them all actually if I could, but
I know, I was gonna say, who does not want a whole litter of golden retriever puppies? I like put them all in the trunk. Like I'm gonna take them all home. Oh my gosh, so great. I honestly have no idea where my puppy is right now, but I will go find him. Oh God, I don't even want to know what's happening. He probably ran away into the corner again. What are you going to dazzle us with next? Do you hate this question? Like what's next? The what's up? Who's on deck next question?
No, first of all, thank you for the dazzle thing. No, I don't like to talk about specifics of what I'm writing, but I'm doing the edits of the fourth Mason novel. I'm sure after I turn it in that I'll have to go through it one more time. But then I want to write a collection of sort of informed short stories, kind of creative nonfiction about old boyfriends. And I have a title, which is Bluto's Girl, because I had a crush on Bluto. I'm so sorry to tell you.
The Popeye Bluto? Oh my God.
And Mighty Mouse. And I shared that on Facebook. Do you know how many people had crushes on Mighty Mouse? I mean, that mouse had a torso, okay? Had a torso.
As did Bluto. And I'm recognizing a pattern here, something I didn't know about you before. It's all about the torso. Who knew? All right, a lot of memes.
They have to be kind of stupid, you know, so you can push them around with them.
Maybe so you can manipulate them, you know, just like.
I think that, you know, I just want to go through from the beginning when it was Mighty Mouse and then Bluto and then all the way up into the, you know, I was in third grade and I loved Billy Harris with all my heart. I knew nothing about him except that he got picked to be the teacher's assistant and got to write on the blackboard. And so I would write Mrs. Billy Harris on my papers, and then, you know, we have such heartbreak and such joy and so many experiences with boyfriends that I think a lot of people also have had or certainly can relate to.
I am so excited to. I always wanted to write something like that called Shapes of Men. That was not just about the boyfriend, but about like men who had influenced me, from like my fifth grade teacher, my dad, you know, my brother, Shapes of Men, and many old boyfriends. I am seeing from viewers that many people are very excited about the next Mason novel as well. So
that's great. That's great.
You have a lot of people anticipating both of those books, including me, of course. All right. So I feel like if you could just walk through the screen right now, that would be good, because I do actually have some rhubarb pie from my garden with a brown sugar crumble top. And I kind of feel like I could sit here all day and talk to you about these things, and people would be like, okay, when is Jenna going to stop talking? So I'm going to let everybody else go, and we can sit here and talk about the pie for a little bit. But thank you for yes, dazzling us literally with all of your stories and your books and your study and your smile and just your you-ness. Like, thank you for spending some time with us this afternoon. Such a joy for me. I hope everybody else enjoyed it, because like for me, I'm just like, it's the best thing ever. So thank you.
And if there happens to be anyone who's not come to a Mighty Blaze before, come all the time. It's just wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, I love you so much.
And oh, wait, I have to do my concluding statement.
Don't God, yeah, okay, good.
So here's what I have to say, that writing is a joy, but the readers who bother to take the time to read what I write, here's how you make me feel. And I'm going to ask that you close your eyes. Nobody will do it because they probably have problems with authority figures like I do. But close your eyes and okay, now open them. Here's how you make me feel. This thing hurts.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown.
I was never prom queen.
It's never too late. You are the reader's prom queen.
Oh my God. Okay. Anyway, thank you.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. You are just a total freaking delight. Thank you.